go over to the computer. I know. I'm gonna go because there's so much we can use. If you haven't been trained, and I haven't, on the van. And you remember Reverend Reed, Dr. Reed told us that we could use the van for so many things, not just to find out who's a registered voter, but if we do an event in the van now, or people attend that event, there are people we can follow up on. So I'm not gonna go screaming and hollering technology because I'm leaving now. Let PD introduce herself. I work at a community college, and during the pandemic, they sent me home with a laptop and said, we're going to meet by Zoom. And I said, well, I thought Zoom was a song by the Commodore. Right. So that's my extent, but I know a little bit more about Zoom. I don't know how to set up a Zoom meeting, but I can get on Zoom, and we meet regularly as the Unity Coalition by Zoom. So my partner and our leader in this effort, because they know when Unity Coalition is involved, we've made them very clear that we're not coming to the party late. We create the party. Okay. We know the party, and I just gave you the grassroots. So if some of you don't know it, I know the history of Black civic engagement in the state of Ohio going back to 1986, and probably more than that because it actually started in the early 60s. So my comrade in arms here, P.D. Talley.
Thank you so much, Tom. It is happy birthday, sis. My birthday's in September. Mine's next Tuesday. Yeah, my name is P.D. Talley, and I want to thank you, Tom, for creating some space here at your conference for my team to come together. We're in the room right across where the registration is, and we're debriefing this special election that we just came out of. Because if you're the boots on the ground, you got to look at what you do, what you did right, what you did wrong, how you can do it better the next time. Tom already talked a little bit about the Unity Coalition. It's a state affiliate of the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation. And my team members hopefully will join in a minute. They're finishing up, and then they're going to come into this presentation. Because just by definition of our name, Ohio Coalition on Black Civic Participation, it's not about us, it's about a coalition. And the coalition, y'all, is NAACP, it's APRI, it's CBTU, it's labor. It's like-minded people coming together to do a thing, right? They empowers every individual organization or individual that is a part of the coalition. And so my background is I'm a political science major, graduated from the University of Toledo. I'm a trade unionist. I started my career at 23 working for the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, a job that afforded me the opportunity to raise my kids. I was a single mom until I met my husband and married him, and he helped raise my boys with me. And it afforded me the opportunity to enjoy just the tip of the iceberg of the middle class. And I don't even think we were middle class because we were still struggling. I had a good union job, but we were still struggling. But it was a great thing. And what I saw the union do in the years that I was with the union, I saw he mentioned Casey Jones. When I went to the interview for the union, the director of the union I went to interview with, all he talked about was Casey Jones. And he talked about Casey Jones because Casey Jones was a black legislator from Lucas County, and his union helped get Casey Jones elected to office. And the connection that he had with me while he raised Casey Jones was because on my resume was a guy by the name of Bill Harris. He was a TV news anchor. He was a director of the youth department in my church, and he happened to be Casey Jones' stepson. And this guy knew that. And so my path was already ordered. He hired me, and I admired the fact that the unions would endorse candidates that. But in my observation of how unions were doing the work, it was equally important that they not only talk to their union members, but who's talking to the community? How are we doing the work in the community? Because there are groups out there like the NAACP, like the sororities, like the fraternities. And so on a national level, the National Coalition was establishing this coalition of all of those groups coming together. And I just happened to be in the right place at the right time to do the work of the National Coalition back in the 1980s. That's how long I've been at this work. In an operation called Operation Big Vote, where we worked to register for more black voters and turn those black voters out at the polls. And so we've had a presence of doing this work in Ohio since 1983. We work in most urban centers in the counties of Cuyahoga, Franklin, Hamilton, Mahoney, Lorain, Montgomery, and our strategies are simple. We got to increase voter registration, right? We got to make sure individuals are educated about what's on the ballot. A lot of folks aren't voting because they're not clear on what's on the ballot, and even if they know, they're not sure that they know enough about candidate A or B, and they don't want to make a mistake, so they opt out, right? So we got to change that dynamic. I had the pleasure of matriculating up through the labor movement to become the first woman who was a principal officer of the Ohio AFL-CIO in the history. A position that when I landed there, one of the first people that I met was Sybil Edwards McNabb. And Sybil Edwards McNabb, who was the chair of this conference at the time, she and I just hooked arms and joined together and said, how can we do better for black folks across the state of Ohio, particularly in the political space? And that happened way back in 2002, 2004. Sybil and I, when you hear, how many have heard the term election protection, right? So election protection was not a real thing until 2004, 2006. Sybil and I helped to write the very first toolkit that was used across the nation. We designed the model right here in the state of Ohio. We didn't call it election protection, we called it voter protection. And we were trying to protect the voters. The election process was going to take care of itself. Our thing was to take care of the voters, because we were coming off of what happened in 2000 with Bush v. Gore. Y'all remember that? And what Sybil and I learned in 2004 was Florida ain't the only state that got some problems. Ohio got some problems too about provisional ballots and undervotes and overvotes and all of this kind of stuff. And so we formed the Voter Protection Coalition in 2004 and taught activists, boots on the ground across this state, what it meant to protect voters in the state of Ohio. And not just activists, we taught attorneys how to go in and represent us if in fact our votes were in trouble. And so as I was kind of thinking about how do we present some information, I say all that about the history of the Ohio Conference NAACP, because nobody knows a whole lot about the Ohio Coalition on Black Civic Participation or the Ohio Unity Coalition, but everybody in the community knows the NAACP, right? And so it only makes sense for me as I think about how we empower the electorate across the state. NAACP has to be foundational in that work. And so I have never taken on an election cycle to try to do this work without consulting with, collaborating with, and being in partnership with the NAACP, either at the state level or any of the units across the state that want to do this work. So our partnership is genuine. When Tom, he was Sybil's political director at the time when he and I first kind of started connecting. And when he became president, I continued that relationship because it is a key to the success of making sure we can empower Black voters. When I think about the impact of Black voters in Ohio, I was doing a web search the other day, and I came across an article that was in the Atlantic, and it was titled "Black Vote in Ohio Fueled by Voter ID Bill." And it was like, what is this article about? And I looked at it. It goes all the way back to 2012, right? Y'all know Ohio delivered. President Obama would not have had a second term except for what happened in Ohio. Y'all know that, right? Okay. But check this out. So everybody thinks it was about Barack Obama in 2012. They think he did his thing. He did his thing in 2008 because it was historical. But in 2012, Barack Obama was not what was fueling the black voter turnout. What was fueling the black voter turnout in 2020, in 2012 was the fact that they were trying to suppress the vote in Ohio.
Absolutely.
Y'all remember that? So he got the benefit of black folks coming out to vote, and black folks were coming out to vote because they were standing their ground. They were saying to the powers that be in this state, you are not going to take away my right to exercise my vote in the state of Ohio. And so if African American turnout in 2012 was in line with what happened in 2008 when we had a historic election, who would have won? It wouldn't have been Barack Obama. It would have been Mitt Romney, would have carried Ohio, and he would not have seen a second term. And I want to read to you what the article went and said about then President Sybil Edwards McNabb, because she was quoted in this article, if I can find it. While African Americans account for 12% of the state's population, they make up 50% of Ohio's electorate in November. So we were overly represented in the electoral space. We're only 12% of the population. We were 50% of the vote share was from black folks in 2012. So it made up 15% of the electorate in November. It was a jump from 11% turnout or vote share in 2008 all the way up to 15%, and that's significant. You can win elections like that. Sybil said, and I quote, "It exceeded our expectations," said Sybil Edwards McNabb, president of the Ohio Conference NAACP. We're very pleased with the results. The NAACP had called the state voter ID. They issued a voter ID bill that year. The Republican controlled House. It was one of the most restrictive in the country. And the NAACP, in collaboration with the Ohio Coalition on Black Civic Participation and all of our partners, we went around the state and we talked to voters and said, hey, we're getting a bad deal. And the only way to change the bad deal we're getting, we got to come out and vote, right? And make sure that our voices are heard. And so we did that. And because we did that, we were instrumental in creating history in the state of Ohio. During the NAACP that year in July in Houston, Attorney General Eric Holder called the Texas voter ID a poll tax. John L. Lewis, who once marched along Martin Luther King, emphasized that these laws were being pushed to stop some people from voting, right? So the point is, we can have candidates that are on the ballot that may or may not be good, but sometimes as black voters, we need a little something more, right? Just like what just happened in August, right? We voted black voters, and again, in Ohio, voted in higher numbers in a special election than they have ever voted. Why? Because they were threatening to limit our voice. We went out and voted under the guise of protect one person, one vote. And we said, no, we will not accept a constitutional change that increases the threshold from 50% plus 1 to 60% in order to change the Constitution. And so when we're looking at how we do this work, people say it's issue driven, and in part it is. But it's also issue driven only if you have a good education program that educates the voters. Tom and I sat in rooms and we knew that this was coming down the pipe. We knew it was coming down the pipe, this whole issue one thing. We knew it last year. The legislature was not able to bring it forward last year. They got it done in May of this year, passed it through the General Assembly, pushed it through the ballot board, and boom, before you know it, in late June, we're being faced with an election that nobody in our community knows about. How many people knew that we were going to have a special election last year before it happened? Not many, right? So Tom and I knew that we had to go to work and we had to do it very strategically, very surgically, and that's part of what the coalition does. Not only are we the boots on the ground, we are the strategy of what it's going to take. Because sometimes what we think needs to happen with our people is not what the party thinks needs to happen. It's not what labor thinks needs to happen. It's not what the progressives who are our friends think need to happen. We know what needs to happen because we're in these communities. We're listening to the people. We're the closest trusted messenger in our communities. And so with us joining and having an alliance, we are now able to begin to shape the strategy about how voters get mobilized, particularly Black voters. We didn't get there easy because it's not enough to just know the strategy. You gotta back the strategy up with our actions. And our action mean that we gotta be able to get people to go knock doors. We gotta be able to get people to get on the phones and make the phone calls. We gotta get people to wear, sister, hold your shirt up right there in the second row, that shirt you got in front of you. That's a political message, y'all, in the community. We gotta get people to wear those shirts, create visibility, create enthusiasm, create a sense of urgency, create whatever we need to create so that we are able to contest for power at the polls. What we did in 2012 in terms of 15% turnout, or 15% share, not 15% turnout. We were 15% of the 100% of people who went and voted. And that is significant. We can get there again. We lost some time, and I don't know how we lost time since 2012, but we lost a lot of voters. And we lost it in part due to things like voter purging, right? They might have been purging voters before 2004, but after 2004, they really went to work to try to dilute the power of Black voters in the state of Ohio through voter purging and things of that nature. And so we got to now go back and rejuvenate, try to get some synergy and energy in the electorate, and we can't do that work unless members of our organizations step forward to get trained to do the work that needs to be done. And so I'm going to pause and let Tom kind of jump back in here. I think we didn't really have a flow or a format for this. I'm going to let you jump back in, and then we can kind of maybe have time to answer some questions, or I want to see where you kind of want to head with that. Again, we have a rich history. Some of the sisters coming in the door right now are part of the coordinators in some of the cities that help stand up the work of the coalition. These are sisters that are from labor. They are sorority sisters. They are NAACP presidents like Judy Hill in Akron and some of the other places. And they're just community activists across the state who have been rolling with this coalition and doing this coalition work for a number of years. I think in the indigenous community, they say, they have a saying that says, many hands make light work. Y'all, we've been working hard, and we've been working hard because we need some more many hands. So if we can get even more of us trained in the NAACP family to join with what we're doing in the coalition, I do believe that we can start to change this state back to a place where it's a nice place for Ohioans to live and for Black Ohioans to thrive, and that we don't have this repressive, suppressive energy that the certain political parties have over the state of Ohio.
Thank you. Scales. Derek Scales. I was going to ask Derek. I was going to ask Andre to get us some chairs. And first of all, I want to welcome our prison chapters to this workshop. We're excited that you're joining us, and want everyone here welcome one of our prison chapters joining us. They're on the I'm going to be visiting you, I think, in October. One of Mansfield, maybe it's Mansfield in October. And so I think I want to hear from some of you. As Petey laid out, and I laid out the foundation that we're working from. And really, the National said to us, probably, I remember a meeting in Cincinnati 5 or 6 years ago, that under civic engagement, every other committee ought to be engaged. So if you're in education, civic engagement ought to be there. Look, we are facing some terrible school boards. We've got school board races coming up. Part of what we're going to talk about over the next few months is how, because they filed a few weeks ago, but we should not have mamas and sons fighting over school boards. We should be thinking about the babies and what they're doing. In every one of our 11 of our at least school districts, our babies are failing. We need school board members who are engaged with the academics of our children and not who's in charge. You know, as we talk about criminal justice, there's a lot of political and civic engagement goes into that. That's why we're joining with the group to end the capital punishment. There are other things. We need to elect judges. We'll recognize a few judges tonight and tomorrow because their understanding of what it means. You know, everybody doesn't belong in prison. Some people need a diversion program. Some people need other programs. And so we need to have those like-minded people on the bench and making those decisions. Again, I go back to my era as a bailiff, and C.J. McLennan and Dayton judge called Carl Kessler. They were the first to have local diversion programs. We call it Montgomery County Jail. No, it was the Monday program. The Monday program. Instead of sending people to the prison, they have them serve their time in local. We've got to engage civic engagement in every one of our committees. I'm going to talk to Wynn tomorrow and challenge the ladies to help us men get our act together as it relates to how we handle our babies. Because when 14-year-old turns a gun on another 13-year-old, something's terribly wrong. And so we've got to figure out as a family how to correct it. So civic engagement is just not the political education committee's job in your unit, or whoever else you may designate. We have a group called Get Out the Vote. But it's just not those. And so I want to impress upon you, it's every one of our jobs to deal with civic engagement, educate our community, because there is a lack of understanding of how the system works. By design, I'm most clear that by design, sometimes these things happen. So we are scratching our heads and saying, no, we know better. We know better. So I'm going to talk to Dee Tolbert. You know, there was a number of people who had to vote provisional in Lorain County this past election. We've got to figure out, I'm going to go up there, we've got to figure out how to turn that around. Because because the new ID, you know, the new law 458, you know, put so many new provisions on us. We have to understand that. And if you need to, we can do a workshop on that, but we need to understand what 458 says. And if you have to have a state issue ID, let's get them. There's a group who's helping us do that. Vote writers, if you need them, you know. But, you know, my mother said earlier, my mother's 100. Well, she has the state issue ID. Well, some of the seniors don't know how to get those IDs. Let's help them get those IDs as units. But there should be no reason why we should not help our constituents. I used to work with a politician, reform politician. Use the words at the local level so our folks understand it. So a lot of work to be done, but in the long run, you have an August 8th. You know, we can sit down and hoop and holler for a day or two. What a great job we did. Okay, now let's get ready for November. You know, so that's where we're at now. And we met just recently to talk about the Citizens Initiative on Redistricting. Petey and I and the coalition did a press release, and we are looking at the Michigan version. So if you haven't heard, Michigan has passed a Citizens Commission on Redistricting. Instead, take the politicians. They have shown us left and right, they have no clue how to write these districts. And the fact that they're going to meet next Wednesday, and by the following week, LaRose is saying they have to have a plan together, says to me they have no desire to have citizen input, to hear from you. And with we did a few years ago, during the pandemic, we had public hearings across the state where we heard from people to say what their district, we heard from elected officials. We need to hear from the people. So the only way for Ohio to have fair districts is to have a Citizens Commission on Redistricting. And that's what we're pushing for. And don't get wrapped up in the weeds in November. There are many people coming from a family of 10 and a Catholic family of 10. There's something wrong. We didn't understand, what was that, how to count? I forget what they called it. But, okay, I respect life. We all respect life. But I think there's something after life that we have to be looking at. Those babies having preschool, the education, and early child education, those kinds of things. Those are just as important. So I just want us to stay focused on the long run, because really, we're the voice. And I've used this little saying before that I opened up the questions. Yeah, this little song we learned in kindergarten. This little light of mine. Oh, yeah. That's true today, because and I borrowed from another author who says the challenge we have is the challenge of carrying around with us the internalizing new NAACP, is the challenge of letting our light shine. Not because it is our light, not only because it's our light, but in the world in which we live, the light we reflect is the only light left. Who's been talking about democracy from day one? Black people, NAACP. We've been on the battlefield for democracy. There are people in this country who wants an aristocracy. He said, if I'm elected, I'm going to be a dictator. He needs to go to where dictatorships are accepted, not in a democracy. So we've got to be that strong voice. We've got to stand up and let our voice of democracy be heard. Okay.
Before you go,
yeah.
let me just put something else out here. So, because you mentioned redistricting, y'all. Redistricting, vote purging, changing the Constitution. This is the new way to take away our rights to vote. Right? Y'all are clear on that. So he talked about the Ohio Citizens Initiative, but I want to draw our attention to what just happened in Alabama, right? Alabama, after the United States Supreme Court agreed with the plaintiffs and sent the drawing of the congressional maps in Alabama back for redraw, their partisan infrastructure, right, redrew new maps that were just as lawful and unfit as the maps that not the state Supreme Court, the United Supreme Court sent the maps back to be redrawn. Y'all know what happened in our state with our maps. Our state Supreme Court continued to call for that these maps were unconstitutional, and our hyper-partisan politicians ignored the will of the court and forced those maps to stand anyway. Well, from a legal standpoint, they got to go back and look at it because what the court ruled in 2022 was that we got to get some maps out there. So we're going to let these illegal maps go. And what Tom is talking about in terms of the meeting on the 13th, the same commission that ignored the state Supreme Court in 2022 are still charged with drawing maps. So do we think they're going to draw some fair maps? Right? They're not going to draw fair maps. So the Alabama redistricting is showing us where these folks' mind is, right? They're going to ignore not only the Supreme Court, and now they're ignoring the Alabama Supreme Court again. And the reason they struck down the maps is because the maps dilute black voter power in Alabama. And in Ohio, it's having the same effect. It's just that, we're not in the South. That's the only difference. But if you come to a community like where I live in Lucas County, where they took 38,000 black voters out of the city of Toledo in the central core of the city, 38,000, and moved those voters out of a democratically elected Senate district and moved them into a Republican district. And the boundaries look like some big dinosaur, and big old body of a dinosaur all around. So you got all this geography. And the head of the dinosaur is the little circle in the middle where they moved all those black voters out. And they want to say that they did not take race into consideration. Right? And so we have to be diligent. Tom said they're coming back in on the 13th, right? Fair districts and equal districts have unified now for the purpose of continuing to monitor and call for fair representation, even in this new redraw that is supposed to happen the 13th. So I want to invite you all, before we open up to questions, if you can come back to Columbus on the 13th and join the Walk in Solidarity so we can send a message that we're paying attention, right? It's okay for them to have the white women from the League of Women Voters, and no offense to anybody that's white in here, it's okay for them to have those white women down there marching and carrying signs, but they need to see us. Because it is us, it is our districts we live in, that are being packed and cracked and diluting our ability to elect who we want. The legislator in that Senate district that I now live in, she's one of the authors of the voter ID bill. Now, do you think she was passing that bill with my best interest at heart? Heck no, right? And so we got to make sure that we are present. So if you are present, I don't know if you're going to have anybody here or has any. I have the information. Maybe we can get it out to you all at this conference, and can come back on the 13th and just march a little bit. If not, you'll have plenty of opportunity, because we're hopeful that we can go back out and go back to the citizens again and ask them to put in place and let citizens draw these maps instead of these politicians who still have control of the ink pen.
So all politics is local. If you can't be here next week, write your legislator.
Right.
Let him or her know we want fair districts. Let's not draw these maps that are disenfranchising voters, black voters. The other thing I want to say is that Reverend Barber, going to Petey's point about using the courts, Reverend Barber calls it Jim Crow Esquire. They've smartened up a bit. The same Jim Crow that our grandparents and some of our parents faced, they're just being a little more sophisticated. They're using the courts and they're using the legislature to do it. So Jim Crow's gone to school. Let me ask Pete a quick question. Is this
No, that's mine.
okay?
Yeah. Whenever we're good.
Okay, I need to find out when we're supposed to end, but let's go start it. Maybe I'm in charge and we can use some discretion here, right, Madam VP? We can move. We can stay as long as we say, right? Since I'm in charge. Go ahead.
Somebody had a question.
Go ahead, nice and loud so we all can hear.
Oh, okay. Over there, the guy talking about reproduction rights. I was listening to NPR yesterday. It was not a shock, because I worked with foster care for a long time, and I saw the things that was happening. But they said they didn't have foster parents to take these children. Once they're born, they're keeping them in the offices. Now the people in the offices is complaining because the kids are buck wild in the offices. So I don't understand, and maybe it's not for me to understand, the rights that I marched in the 60s and 70s and 80s, so women would have these rights. Where were you when these old white men went in there and changed everything? I don't understand this. I mean, we worked hard to get those rules changed so we'll have an opportunity to work. Even back then, if you got pregnant and it didn't matter if you were married, you had to quit your job or you would get fired. We're going back to that. Young women, where are you
There's
to allow this to happen? And I'm talking about black women,
right.
okay?
There's a gap, but what we have to do, sis, and where are you from? What city?
Canton.
Canton. There has definitely been a gap from what you all did, from our ancestors and the marches that you all did and the freedom that you all were able to get and the justice you were able to get in the 60s and the 70s and the 50s. There's a gap. I don't know what happened to the gap, right? But you all have to still push this future generation. And I know it is hard. I was listening to MSNBC today driving in. And those commentators, I think it was Eugene Robinson, was saying on MSNBC, democracy is hard.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not easy, y'all. But we can't not stay in the fight. We've got to get the next generation, just like how many people told their grandkids or kids about they better vote in 2008? We gotta figure that piece out again and make sure that everybody in our family, and we can't wait till election day to do that. We gotta have a plan. I do this with my family every year. I say, okay, granddaughters, sons, grandkids, what day are we gonna go vote early? Or if it ain't early, it's on election day. And we stick to the plan. And I don't care how much my 40-year-old son say, I'm too tired, I work too hard. You're not going to be my son and not vote. And we got to have plans just like that to make sure our family immediate is going to vote. And then I compare with my extended family. I make all of my family show their I voted sticker on my Facebook page. And if we create that kind of family cohesiveness in our communities and in our family, it's on us. We can't say what happened. We got to say, what can we do to change the current state that we're in? And even though in the 60s they didn't have these, they didn't have those, but we got the benefit of those now, so we should be able to do better. And if we don't know how to operate the technology the way Tom don't know how to operate it, maybe me too halfway. I'm halfway in, halfway out. We can find these young people and tell them that you want to do a voter registration drive using the phone. And then use our toolkit and get your young person to teach, to get them to work, helping us to do that. So we got to create what is missing in our community, sis, and I appreciate it because there is a real gap. Your point is taken, is real. But I think nobody's going to fix that gap with us.
The other thing is, if you go to the state conference website or the national website, there is a reproductive rights toolkit. So look that up and follow that. I don't know if, I forget what convention it was at, but maybe 3 or 4 years ago when this issue was big on the agenda. The women at the convention were very adamant that we're not going to let white men tell us what to do with our bodies anymore. Right. They've been doing it all of our lives.
That's right.
And so this is about you. And I've always said, as a legislator, I probably consider a pro-choice legislator, but it's between you, your husband, and your minister, and doctor.
And your doctor.
Those are the ones who ought to be engaged in this. And so if we follow the toolkit and look at the NAACP toolkit, I think we put it on the website. If it's not there, then I would go to the national and get it. So go ahead.
I don't know how many of you had the opportunity to zoom in last night for a national call for the youth in college, for the Get Out to Vote. Phenomenal. We do have a program in place, and we can kind of share that later. But there is a whole program that is going to merge with the adult units regarding, they have the OR codes already ready to go, things in your phone. We have the deadline dates of when we're supposed to roll out programs. Universities have a goal of rolling out 500 registered voters by a certain date. There is a 2023 toolkit to get out to vote that will be coming out next week, available from the national office. And there will be another training via the national office about what our programs are to get more young people involved. And it has everything that we need to take back to our units and to take back to our youth and college division.
Yeah, as you recall, I've had at least 3 trainings with national, with you leading up to the last election. They know us. They know Ohio because I wear them out, asking questions, saying, can you help me with this, can you help me with that? I saw some more hands. Go ahead, in the back there. Nice and loud, please.
This last election, I voted early. And I don't know if everybody knows this or not, but there were some people that was at the polling place that had just moved. It was a couple of days before. They had just moved out their house the week before, okay? And they were letting them know and trying to get their address changed on that day that they wanted to vote. They did not let them vote that day because they had moved out of a house into another house that was not in the system. So therefore, they made them to go back and re-vote so that they could vote in November. But they had to vote provisional in this election. My question is, if you know you're gonna move, would it be right not to let them know? Because if they're gonna make you vote provisional, what do they do with those? I mean, we don't know whether they're gonna go back and let those people vote be counted or not. But it's something that we need to think about. That if you're moving the week of the election, and you just moved out of a house this last Saturday, why would you go and let them know that you just moved?
Because their people are trying to be honest, right?
Being
They're
honest,
trying to
but
be honest.
that put the vote, to me, that put their vote in jeopardy.
It did. It most definitely did. Stuff happens, and I think that, again, if we have this buzz on the street and we hold ourselves out as the go-to people, and they would have known this is where you can go to find out what you should do in that situation. And organizations, that's what we do in the Ohio Unity Coalition, right? We have a toll-free number that we publicize everywhere, and we get a lot of phone calls, don't we, Cynthia? Right? And so part of it is, again, since we're building this boots on the ground piece, we're gonna hold ourselves out as the go-to people in our community that people can come to and get information. Because if we all were trained and we know that that's the way, that's what the situation that voter would have been in if they would have called one of us, we probably would have told them to do something a little bit different in terms of that, right? And it's not being dishonest, it's just about making sure. I mean, that person is caught up in the crack, right? And there's no reason why they should not be able to cast a vote to have it counted.
Right.
Even if it's provisional, there may be a way for them to vote provisional and still make sure it's counted. But we had to get that person to the right polling location. And we had enough time to do that. So
That's what we need to educate ourselves and get to know your board of election people. 9 out of 10 of them will give you good information, will be of assistance. And it's just as Representative Gerald, every legislator wants to come before you. Invite him or her to come before you and share with you how a bill becomes a law. How things happen in General Assembly. Don't let these things become a mystery because they're not a mystery, they're just chaotic. But that's what democracy is, right? So, I look myself sometimes and wonder, how does this thing ever become law? Well, I know the legislative process. We'll take 2 or 3 more questions. Okay.
On her point in particular,
Yes.
we're doing a special election September 8th. I knew a friend that was about to move. Okay.
Yeah.
On the September the 8th election, it's kind of speaking to your point. I knew someone was about to move or they may move. And so I just encouraged them to vote early. Right. And so they allow you to vote. They allow you to vote early.
yeah.
And
We have 28 days where people can cast their vote. And so that's part of the dynamic we got to get to on the ground. this waiting until all the way up to the election day. We gotta take advantage of the fact that we got 28 days, y'all, to become 20% of the vote, right? 28 days is a long time. We can get a lot of people voting in that 28-day period. And so we gotta know that and take advantage of that and make sure the voters know, here's when early vote starts, this is the days that you can vote early, these are the times, this is the location. And that's a lot of the work that we do in the coalition. We put out push cards that we take to churches and we take to bowling alleys and we take everywhere. It's got the NAACP logo on it. It's got the Deltas logo. It's got the Sigmas logo, the Masons logo. You know, everybody's logo is on it. And we get that information out into the community. We use the Black media. We run ads in Dr. McNair's paper and Dr. Ellis's paper and other people's paper. We run ads we create ads on the radio so that people can know.
Go ahead, let's go over here, then we'll go back here. Over here.
My question is about redistricting. I've been hearing a lot about it, and I've been hearing redistricting, and I just want to know who's the they that's changing the redistricting. You know what I'm trying to say, and how does the citizens do it?
So currently, there is a commission on redistricting. Commission on redistricting, made up of the auditor, Secretary of State, the governor, and 2 legislators.
2 from each.
2 from each party. Okay, and
2 from the Senate, 2 from the House.
yeah, 2 from the Senate, 2 from the House. That's who currently makes up the redistricting commission. That will probably be who will make it up this time. What we're proposing is a citizens commission, and those individuals will be nominated and elected to serve on this commission. I think are we still working through some of those details?
15, yeah.
Yeah, and so, but it will be, instead of the politicians, it will be the citizens. You know, D's and R's and academics and so on and so forth. If you think I should do that, and I'll send that out to you in 2 weeks.
Okay.
So you know, it's not going to happen anytime soon, because the thought is that it's going to be rejected by the Attorney General a couple of times, as was once before. We resubmit the signatures just again. So if it's rejected again, we're going to do it again. But eventually, we're going to have to go to court. So if we do it right, then when we go into January of 24, it can be ready to go on November 24 ballot. That's why if you say, well, I signed that petition already, that was the first time. We're going to have to do it a second time. And then we're going to decide if we do it a third time. If they reject it. Now, God bless them if they accept it. You know, they have it now. If they accept it, then we're good to go. You know, we begin to work on. But if they don't, then we're going to come back out to the public one more time. This is where you will be involved, because we chose to not be involved the last time, to give you guys a chance to rest between the 8th and getting the petitions. But then we will come back again the third time. And then at that time, the steering committee will say, can we do it again? Too close to Christmas, too close to the first of the year? Let's just go to court. Now, going to court is going to cost some money. So that's where we got to find some duckies to pay for the lawyers to go to court. So it's going to be a lengthy process, but that's why it started now. But the only fair way is you know, Google it, and you will see where Michigan has a citizens commission, and it is working. It worked great. So look at that. One more question, and then I got to really hop.
Question.
Nice and loud, please.
And an answer for you, ma'am. If some of these ladies get involved in the, say, the women's organizations, like Democratic women's organizations, it's not a white organization, it's where you get your information at. But I have a question in regards to people in the nursing homes, because they don't really want you to come in and assist those with them, because they get balance there. But when they of times, Republicans fill them out for them.
Well, it's not, this is where you need to understand and talk to your boards at election. It's not supposed to be that way. These and ours collectively supposed to go into the nursing home and the person votes, and that's not happening. Let's challenge it. Let's challenge it. Okay, I'm getting directions left and right. What does it say? Okay.
So this is coming directly from
Oh.
the facility.
Yeah, so, we have a question, you all, if y'all give us a few more minutes, from someone that's on the Zoom.
So the question is, how much effort, I'll repeat the answer to this, how much effort is being put into developing black, what's that?
Black-centric.
Candidates.
Black-centered candidates, right? And so, I was, in 2020, I was part of the Ohio State University, partner with me and my organization, just for the question of development of candidates, and this was not all candidates, we were focused primarily on Black women, at the time, to get them to, and there are other organizations in the state called Lead Ohio and different organizations that people can go to learn how to be a candidate to run for office. Because sometimes people just jump out there, oh, I can do that, right? And then they get their feelings hurt when they don't win, right? There is some training that you need to undergo so that you know how to fundraise, so that you know how to mobilize, so that you know all of the ins and outs of what it takes to become a candidate. I don't know why Tom told me to take this. He's had to do this before. But I don't know, brother, sister, whoever asked the question, if there's a concentrated effort around Black-centric voters. We need that. And one of the things I'm happy to say is, in addition to me being the convener of the Ohio Unity Coalition, which is a 501c3, we also developed a 501c4 where we can do express advocacy. That 501c4 is called Black Ohio Leaders for Democracy. And we can do some of that work there. We're trying to make sure we got the C3 stuff down first, which is the registration, education, get out the vote, and then we occasionally can pivot. And so that's the one entity that I know is doing some of that work, but I'm sure we're not the only one.
So let's conclude here. I've got to move on to the next one, and we'll give ourselves 10 minutes. It's 3:45, 3:55. We'll start the next workshop. But there's a group also called School Board Schools, who are helping educate and run candidates for school boards. And we're partnering with them. They came to the Dayton meeting a few weeks ago. We are connecting with them, and they may be here. They may be at this convention. If not, I will let you know, because we will be partnering, and our education committee will be not partnering, collaborating with them to get candidates to go get trained to run for school board schools. It is 3:46, I believe.
10 minutes.
Let's take a 10-minute, let's come back at 3:50.
Can I give you guys my website if y'all want to find us? We're at www.ohiounity.org. That's www.ohiounity.org.
10 minutes.
Can we take it up in our site?
10 minutes.
Yes, I'll put you in.
And so the other thing Petey and I are going to do is going to have our technology people put that site on our state website,
And
along with the media. So we're going to try to get all that stuff on the state conference site, so you can have one-stop shop. 3:50. See you in a few minutes.
Thank you, everybody.
You've got 10 minutes.
I see.
In the same room.
What's the thing in here?
I think it's black on black.
Yeah, black, right there.
State of black.
Oh, the State of Black Ohio, y'all, is in this room. If y'all want to hear about that, it's in this room at 4 o'clock, except for the Unity Coalition.
Okay.
4 o'clock.
That's your choice.
That's Tiffany's.